Great. Hi, everybody. Welcome to another session of Control+M Presents. Thanks for joining us today. As a reminder to all attendees, we are recording this session, so you're all on mute. When question time rolls around at the end of the presentation, you'll need to remember to unmute yourself. Today, we're going to talk about something really important, which is cycle counting. For most companies, managing inventory accuracy is critical. Knowing what you have on hand, where your work in process is, and keeping inventory turns up to industry benchmarks can make or break a company. To that end, Plex is a really terrific cycle counting module that you probably know a little bit about, and we've really seen it turn some companies around. Amber Zancolli is going to be talking about cycle counting today. Amber joined us about a year and a half ago, and she has been an amazing addition to our team. She usually focuses on our process manufacturing clients like food and beverage, but trust me, her talents are not limited to any one industry. Between her deep Plex knowledge and her desire to help Plex clients and her excellent teamwork, she has been an incredible asset to the whole Control+M family. So without any further ado, go ahead, take it away, Amber.
Thank you, Patty. And thanks all of you for joining us. In today's Control+M Presents, we'll introduce you to cycle counting in Plex. We'll talk about why you may want to use it. I'll show you how to set it up, and I'll show you how to add and perform some cycle counts as a demo in Plex. We'll end by sharing some best practices for cycle counts, with time at the end, as Patty said, to take your questions. A cycle count is an inventory auditing procedure used for inventory management. Cycle counts provide a systematic counting and tracking of your inventory. In this procedure, smaller subsets of inventory are counted regularly throughout the year, as opposed to what we might call a physical or full physical inventory that might be performed only once a year. These smaller counts may include only a select part or item, or a group of parts or items. And now I'll try to say part or item because, as Patty said, I spend a lot of time with the food and beverage folks who like to call what they make items. I know many of you in other spaces call them parts. Just know when you hear me use those two terms, I am using them interchangeably here. You may also perform your cycle counts on select physical areas or locations within your facilities. A cycle count really just reflects the actual inventory on your shop floor and in other storage locations you maintain. Cycle counts is a module that is part of the inventory module group in Plex. In Classic, this can generally be found under the cycle inventory menu. You can type Control+M on your keyboard and do a menu search for the term cycle inventory to find the path within the menu structure of your PCN's configuration. And in UX, with the standard menu structure, cycle counts can be found under the main menu in Inventory Management, Inventory Control, or again found by doing Control+M and searching for cycle counts. Now, most of the content today will be geared towards screens in UX, but we're happy to provide additional details to those of you working in Classic. In Plex, you use the cycle counts module to compare your Plex inventory. That's all the parts or items and supplies that you receive, produce, or adjust in Plex to your actual physical inventory. You confirm the inventory that physically exists, and upon completing a count in Plex, Plex synchronizes the two. Reconciliation of any variances that occur can be handled two different ways. You can choose to retire any containers that are not found in their last known Plex location, that is, retiring them in place. Or you could use a cycle retire location to hold containers that are not found for review before final disposition. We'll demonstrate that in the presentation in the demo section. You can use the cycle count module to complete both the smaller, more frequent counts, as well as for your full annual or full physical inventory. So why might you want to use cycle counts? Well, you may want to use these because more frequent counting helps to maintain real-time inventory accuracy and maintains Plex as our single source of truth. We can isolate issues or errors and respond to them quickly, reducing stockouts and preventing downtime on the production floor due to missing source, or missed shipments due to inventory shortages. Finding discrepancies helps us to identify errors in production recording or shipping and receiving when inventory quantities are off. This can allow you to potentially get ahead of any customer issues or to at least respond to them quickly. More frequent counts and reconciliation means fewer surprises at year end. The accountants like that. Timely inventory gives us a chance to investigate issues sooner, with a greater likelihood that any mistakes are not too far gone to correct and investigate and correct. These factors mean we have less inventory write-offs and obsolete inventory. And when write-offs are required, we're able to spread them out over time rather than being shocked by a huge adjustment number at year end. Cycle counting in Plex helps to speed up the counting inventory process, reducing the downtime required to take your inventory. A client had shared with us that before Plex, it would take them about 2 weeks to do their inventory. That included the counting, tagging, entering, and reconciling, then having it audited by a third party. They went live on Plex early in May, and then when they closed their books in July, inventory was done in just 2 days. The next year when they closed, inventory was perpetually up to date, and they passed their audit. So now let's review some settings and setup tables required and optional for use with cycle counting in Plex. As I mentioned, when we're determining what to do with our reconciled inventory, we can use this cycle retire location. A cycle retire location can be used for the reconciliation of any inventory not found or accounted for during a count. It acts as sort of a purgatory or bardo, where inventory remains until you determine the disposition of any containers not found. Because before a write-off, you may send your team out to recount or look for missing containers. Or when doing a full inventory or larger count, you may wait for all the cycles to be complete before making any determination, as inventory may just be found in unexpected locations. This is a virtual location in Plex, and it does not have to be a physical location in the facility. You can configure a cycle retire location by enabling the cycle inventory retire location flag on that location in the location detail screen. You may need to turn this flag on in settings for the checkbox to be visible to you. Additionally, you'll need to enable the setting retire location from location. You'll want to make sure that you create one cycle retire location for each Plex building in your PCN. If you do have this retire location from location setting turned on, but no cycle retire location has been defined, any unaccounted for inventory will just be retired in place when a cycle is complete. There are some setup tables you'll want to look at, and the cycle status is one of them. These are the minimum recommended statuses from Plex, and these need to be configured correctly for you to be able to add a count. And you want to be sure that you don't have the started status flagged as default, or you'll be unable to start your cycle counts. We use what Plex calls cycle parameters to manage the number of items in a count. This way we can specify that subset or group of inventory that's selected. And we can include one or more parameters in our selection. The parameters available on a count depend on the cycle type. Plex has Plex has inventory, supply, and tool cycle types available. These types of parameters, or these parameters you see on the screen now, are for an inventory type cycle count. You'll note that I added the part/item for those of you referring to either in your PCN. Glossarization will be a factor here in how some of those values read on screen. If you don't see one of these parameters in your PCN, you may just need to enable it in settings. And you can search for settings within the cycle inventory setting group for setting name, using that wildcard %sign and parameter use as your search string to find available options. Here are the parameters available for a supply cycle type. Again, glossary usage may impact how these appear on your PCN. And here are the tooling parameters. In addition to those parameters on the previous slides, cycle inventory groups is an optional parameter that can be added. There's some configuration to set this up in your environment. You'll need to enable the setting cycle inventory group display. That actually adds the group visible onto the location detail screen. You'll go into the cycle inventory group setup table and add those cycle inventory groups you'd like to use. You see in the example on screen, I've just added 2 groups, group 1 and 2. Then you go into your locations and you can assign the cycle inventory group to the location or locations you want included in that group. The purpose here is to configure groupings for locations you may want to count together. And when setting up a count, you can then select that cycle inventory group or groups to count. When a cycle count that results in a change to an inventory quantity is completed, such as retiring or a quantity going up or down, an inventory adjustment is automatically posted to Plex. You can configure an adjustment reason code to be used for these adjustments by setting the cycle complete flag on an adjustment code in the adjustment reason setup table. You can then use this to filter on the inventory adjustment screen for that cycle count reason code. Planned cycle counts can be automatically generated by Plex using the cycle frequency field on part details or locations and by enabling nightly generate cycle inventory setting. When enabled, a cycle frequency will define how often the cycle counts are generated for a specific location or part or item. Cycle frequencies are set up in that cycle frequency setup table, and there is a very specific set of values that Plex will expect and work with. That's hard-coded logic in the programming there. There's a setting, we said nightly generate, doesn't really run nightly as in daily. So you'll notice that daily isn't an option here. Instead, weekly, which will run each week on Sunday evening. Monthly will run the first day of the month. And there are also options for generating cycles automatically quarterly, semi-annually, and annually. Settings related to those scheduled cycle counts are, again, the nightly generate cycle inventory, which actually enables that schedule to run and create the scheduled counts in your PCN. Auto generate cycle parameters, which determines whether scheduled cycle counts will be created based on cycle frequency on the part or item, or by the cycle frequency specified on a location. When part is selected, cycles will be generated with the part number as the only cycle parameter. And when location is selected, cycles will be generated with the location as the only cycle parameter. There are some additional settings such as auto generate start month. That lets you specify the month to start your quarterly and semi-annually generated cycles and annually. You can also define if you want those to begin on a calendar or fiscal cycle year. Fiscal year cycle. On the first day of the month, that cycle generation will run. The setting cycle generation divide over time can also be used to schedule on the selected frequencies throughout that period instead of having them scheduled where every cycle is due on the first of the month. If this setting is on, then Plex will break up your cycles by week, generating them on a weekly basis, still according to that annual, semi-annual, or quarterly calendar. And those will get generated again on Sunday evening. It will not divide the inventory evenly across the counts, right? It's just dividing up those counts that you've added. Plex doesn't really know what inventory is in those locations or items or quantities to be able to divide by a quantity value. So if you do have multiple locations with different quantities, this may pull inventory in unevenly in the cycle generations. It could even cause some buildings to be counted completely before the end of the month. It's important to keep up with your scheduled cycle counts. If you're not going to complete some of your automatically scheduled counts, you can just close or delete them and cancel them from the cycle count screen. We'll take a look at that in a moment. In addition to cycle counting inventory at your physical locations, you can count inventory at other locations like a supplier and a subcontractor. So to select counting at a subcontractor, we would just select that subcontractor location. You know that if you do use subcontract now, when you add a subcontractor to Plex, corresponding subcontractor location is also added to Plex, and it just has the same name as the subcontractor. So you'll see here in my example, I've set a parameter to count by location using that subcontractor location as my parameter value. You can also count inventory from a certain supplier. You can use the parameter setting, purchasing supplier parameter use, and then start your count selecting that purchasing supplier. And this would be useful in the case of knowing that you had an inventory issue or inventory count issue with some inventory you received from a specific supplier. Maybe they notified you of an issue and you want to do a cycle count only on the material you received from them. and not the same material that you may have received from alternate suppliers. So now let's just jump into Plex so you can see how all of this works. So if we're starting from the launch page, we can go to our hamburger menu. And again, we'll find the cycle count option inside our inventory management, inventory control, cycle counts menu node. We'll just start by adding a cycle count. So we'll click add in the action bar. Then we'll pick the cycle type. Again, you have inventory, supply, or tool cycle types available. If you don't use supplies or tooling in your PCN, you just may not see those options listed there. I'm going to go ahead and select an inventory cycle type. You'll always want to specify a due date for your cycles. And the same way you can have Plex schedule cycles for you, you can set cycles to be due in the future. I'm going to set this cycle to be due today since we're going to process it in just a moment here. Now we'll add our first parameter. I'm going to select building as the parameter I'm using, and then I'll look at my parameter values. I'm going to select warehouse because I know that I have some locations there that I want to count. To add additional parameters to this cycle count, I can click add parameter in the action bar and then just continuing to add parameters to filter my inventory by. Remember I showed you that optional cycle group setup. I'm going to select the cycle group that I added here, group 1. So now we've added the type of inventory, or I'm sorry, the type of cycle we want to perform, the due date, and we've added a few parameters. Now we can just click OK to add our cycle. So that was really all it took to add a cycle count. And I'll talk a little bit about the screen here before I do a search. The fields you see available in your cycle count screen up in the filter grid may vary. There are some settings you can use to enable or disable the visibility of certain settings here. But you can see that there are quite a lot of different ways to search for cycles. And this would be the screen we look at for our planned cycles. And if we look at our status here, there we go. One of the things we viewed in the presentation was that cycle status setup table, where we had our statuses of planned, started, completed, and complete in process. You'll notice that this defaults to show you your planned cycles, so that you can see those things that you need to count, but you can also change that filter there if you want to see any cycles that are in progress or previously completed cycles. I'm going to just do a wide open search here for any of our planned cycles by clicking search. And you'll see that I have some of my previously scheduled cycles, in addition to that new cycle that we just scheduled together, we just added together. You'll see here that some of my due dates for those automatically scheduled cycles are a little past due or a little out of date. I'm not going to go back and count this Worcestershire dry mix because I probably have that coming up on another scheduled count. So I can just go here and again, this would be settings are permission based, but an authorized person would be able to just delete the count, scheduled count, and remove it from the screen. To perform the cycle count that we added, we'll click into the hyperlink to drill right back into that cycle count. So we see here that we could actually still edit this by adding additional parameters. We could select a row to delete a parameter if we wanted to make a change prior to starting that cycle count. But at this point, all we've really done is created this shell of a cycle count. We don't know what inventory is involved in it, and we haven't given in Plex any values or any information. So to actually start the count, we do need to go here to the action bar and click on start. When we click on that start button, quite a few things happen. This takes a snapshot of all containers that match the cycle parameters that we specified, and it pulls them into the cycle. You'll notice here that I apparently picked the wrong group for my cycle. So what I can do at this point is I can just delete that cycle. You know what? I set up a cycle parameter that just didn't have any inventory in it. So we can just add a new cycle to remedy that. I'm going to do this one just a little bit faster to catch us up. Adding my building, setting my building filter for the warehouse. Let's add that other parameter and we'll pick that other cycle group. We'll click OK. And then we'll drill right back into that cycle count. Now we'll click Start. And we'll wait a moment while Plex takes that snapshot of our available inventory. Again, because this snapshot happens, having a real-time snapshot of the on-hand containers in the location or locations is very important for your cycle count accuracy. And that's why it's important to not start the cycle count until you're going to actually conduct it. On the count now, we can see that a couple things happened once it was started. My parameter values are grayed out, right? They're kind of locked down, so I can no longer add or remove parameters. I see that my cycle has changed to a status of started. I can see the start date, who started the count, and I can see some statistics about the count currently. I can see that 0 of the expected 34 containers have been accounted for, and currently my accuracy is 0 there. We'll talk a little bit more about the calculation for cycle count accuracy in a moment. Below here, we see the containers that Plex expects to be in the building and in the locations that are within my cycle group 2. You'll see here that there are a couple of locations, a few locations included. So that was the benefit of creating those cycle inventory groups and then enabling that parameter in the setting. Some of you may use cycle counting in the full Plex UX browser here. You can additionally do cycle counting, performing the count on your mobile device. We'll show slides of that in the end, but at this point, we're just going to complete our cycle count on the screen here. There's still a couple of different ways you can do it. If you don't have scanners, right, and you are someone performing a cycle count with a computer or tablet, having Plex in the browser, you could use the grid down here to complete your accounting for, or telling Plex that you've found these containers, right, when we're accounting for. I'm going to go ahead and account for, or tell Plex that I have found these 3 containers in the location expected with the quantity that Plex has in the system. By selecting those rows, I see that the status currently is unaccounted for. I'm going to go ahead and go up into the action bar and click on Account For to commit that count to Plex. So now I've told Plex, hey, I found these. The data you have on them is good. We can see that the cycle date was added at the time that Account For was clicked, and that the status of those lines is accounted for. Now, if we scroll back up here, we can see some other information. Our accounted for now shows 3 containers accounted for, 31 unaccounted for, and a current count accuracy of 13, right? That's just doing the math of the accounted for against the unaccounted for. So what happens if we find a different quantity in the location? We would select that row, and then we would just type in the quantity that we actually found. In this case, because we rarely find more than we expect, although that sometimes happens, I'm going to say I only found 90 pounds in that location. And I'm going to go ahead and account for that container. Another scenario could be finding a container in a different location. So perhaps I found this first container of black pepper, but instead of AZWH01, it was actually in a different location. And so I could tell Plex, you know what, I found that here. You would be scanning, right, typically, or if you were at a location, visibly seeing that inventory, you could make that determination. So I'm going to indicate that I found that in a location other than the expected location. And I'm going to click Account For. I'm going to scroll down so we can see the status of that. So we see here, right, those first 4 containers that we counted show accounted for. We see that the quantity that we edited on the prior container was taken here. On the one that we just found in a new location, Plex says, oh, that was moved. Now, if we were to go look at our inventory screen right now for black pepper, it's right here. Refresh this. right? We see that, our values have not yet been updated. So that container that I changed the quantity on, 315, we go here and look for 315. Plex still shows that there is only, or that there's 100, right? Plex hasn't moved the other container because these values are just being stored here within the count. They've not yet been committed to the system. They've been committed to the count, but not to inventory. So we've counted some containers accurately. We've found some alternate container values. I'm going to go ahead and just account for some of these as if they were found in place. In addition to accounting this way by clicking into the checkbox here using the grid, if we did have a scanner attached to our computer or tablet we were performing the count on, we could actually use this scanning portion here. And so in that case, we could mimic scanning a serial number. When we do that, right, Plex isn't going to default that quantity for us. Plex is going to allow us to type that quantity in, type in a different quantity than was expected. And then here we would actually also be scanning the location. Since I don't have a scanner, I'm just going to type that in. And then I'm going to click account for in the action bar. And we'll see that that also moves down to the bottom of the screen. So a couple things to note, and I'll talk a little bit more about this in best practices, but there is a limit to the number of items you can have in a count. Plex will hard code that at 10,000. But in addition to that limit, you can see that because of the number of rows on the screen and knowing some limitations of visible rows on screens currently, you would want to keep your cycle inventory parameters in use to be able to keep your counts small enough to be completed on the screen. If you're scanning on the device, maybe a little less concern for the visibility of those containers because you're just scanning as you go. But if you are using the grid system, it's more convenient to have some smaller counts. So let's go ahead and just account for the rest of our inventory. In fact, I'm going to click this box to check count for all of them, except for this one and this one. Because what happens if we don't find inventory in our location? Well, if Plex expects us to find those containers and we just don't scan them, right? We leave that blank and we consider those as just unaccounted for, right? Not found. We can see our statistics have continued to update as we work on that count. If we're ready now and we say, yep, you know what, I can't find those, they're not in the location, they're not in the group of locations that we anticipated, now I'm ready to complete my count. And to do so, we just click complete in the action bar. Plex is going to ask us, are we sure we want to complete this cycle? I'm going to say yes. And then Plex is going to do this updating. And what's happening now is that each of those containers is being updated either with the quantity change, the quantity confirmation, location move if a container was moved. Once the count is complete, Plex will inform us of that. We'll hopefully get that green success banner. And then we can see here, right, that these have been accounted for. We can also print a version of this report in case we wanted to retain this as a paper document for some reason, but there's no need to do that because as we know, this is going to be available to you in Plex to return to in the cycle count history. So what happened to our inventory? I'm going to do a search here and I see that a container now shows that it's in this place, cycle inventory retire warehouse, right? So let's look at that cycle inventory retire location. This is that, remember, purgatory location that we set up so that any containers that are not found in a count will automatically get moved to that location. This would give me an opportunity at this point to determine if I wanted to send someone back out to go look for them and try to account for them, or if I were ready to inactivate these containers. Typically, it's going to be your warehouse management folks, your accounting folks, making those determinations and making those adjustments in the system. Once they decided to do so, they could just edit those containers via a mass update and inactivate them. Again, all of this is going to be permission-based, and I'm going to need to select a reason code when I do that. And I'm going to select my reason code of cycle count. You'll notice that I'm able to select that reason code in my adjustment picker. And we'll go take a look at our inventory adjustment screen when that's complete. There we go, to see the outcome of that. So now we're on the inventory adjustments screen. If you're not familiar with this screen, this is where many of the accounting folk and inventory management folk come to look to see what's happened to our inventory quantities, what's happened to our values, what are our write-off amounts, where have we made adjustments. I just did a wide open search filtering for activity today, any inventory adjustments today. And I can see that there are a few. I have a few that were a last action of cycle complete. And we'll look at those containers in a moment. That's the last action, or that is the transaction that occurs when we complete our cycle count. We see that because of that, we had some inventory adjustments that were posted. Remember those containers that I said I have 90 instead of 100? Plex just posted that adjustment for me when it adjusted the containers. In addition, we can see that those containers I updated with a mass update have a different last action. But because I selected my adjustment reason code of cycle count, I can actually view those all together. Remember the setup table where we enabled the cycle count flag on our adjustment reason. So those automatic cycle counts also got that adjustment reason. And depending on the filters you have available here, I could filter by that and see all of my adjustments for that reason code if that were something I wanted to review. So let's take a look at a couple of these containers that were edited or changed. We had some adjustments as a result of those. When we complete our cycle, Plex is again going to update that last action to cycle complete. I can look here in the container history and see some information about this container. Now, this is a container I just happened to add to the system, so we don't see the receiving details we would typically see or any other movement. But we do see that the cycle complete happened here. We remember red means change. My quantity changed from 100 to 90. And then when the cycle was complete and posted, Plex just posted that update, right? No change there once the cycle was complete with the same value. Now we're back on the cycle count detail screen. In fact, I'm going to use my history to go to cycle counts. And I'm going to refresh this screen. So now we see those planned cycle counts. If I wanted to get back and see the history of that count that I had completed, right, I could filter for that. I'm going to show all filters. I filtered for a cycle status of completed, and I'm going to filter for a completed date just of today. I'm going to do a search, and you can see that I can see those previously completed counts. And as I mentioned, we can always get back in here and see the result of the count. We can always print the report, and we can even export that to Excel. Now there's some terrific documentation on cycle counts here. If we click on the question mark from the cycle count page, Plex will take us directly to this cycle count kind of knowledge article or knowledge base. If we want to analyze the cycle count, I wanted to show you those accuracy fields. Plex just has a really good guide here for understanding how it calculates those accuracy fields. So accuracy for the actual just accuracy of the count is going to be the actual inventory on the shop floor compared to whether or not we were able to account for those, and if we had any difference or something was moved or reactivated, or we had to change the count, right? Plex is going to look at that number of accounted for containers minus those moved or reactivated over the total numbers in the count. We can see that there is also a calculation for the quantity accuracy, as well as the count accuracy. I want to mention that because we can see here, right, that I've added in my settings the visibility of accuracy and count accuracy to the screen. Those are optional. You don't need to have those turned on. I think most of us want to know how successful our counts are and how successful our inventory management program is, so we do leave those on. I'm going to go back here and let's add an additional cycle count for us to do together. I'm going to show you another scenario. Just going to select another inventory cycle with a due date of today. And for my parameter, I'm going to go ahead and select an item, right? I'm going to search by item. No, pepper, maybe sugar. So I've just selected a single item to be counted. Oh, where's my count? Maybe I didn't add it. We'll try again here. Pick tomorrow, just for fun. Pick a different item. There we go. Not sure why Plex didn't want to show me those counts, but we see those here now. So I'm going to go ahead and drill into that sugar cycle count that we created and start it. We remember when we click on start, Plex is going to get that snapshot of all of our inventory. If we have a cycle count that is for a specific item, and we go out to count it and we scan an item that is not included in that count, right? It's not one of those inventory items. I'm just going to key in a different serial number for a different item. Right? Plex is going to tell us this is not valid for any cycle. And the reason for that is because we've set a parameter of a very specific set. We are only counting our sugar. So if we try and scan an item that is not sugar, Plex is not just going to automatically add that to the count. I'm going to go back and add another cycle count. Again, cycle inventory type of cycle type of inventory with the due date of today. I'm going to do location as my parameter, and I'll do a location, this specific location. We'll go ahead and we'll click into that cycle to start it. Right. So we see that I've got some vegetable soup bulk in this location. I'm going to go ahead and count for all of those. But what happens if I find something else that's not expected in the count in this location? Well, in that case, because this count is the parameter of location and not a parameter locking you down to a specific item, Plex is going to let me add another serial number, AZWH10, right? Because this is a valid serial number, a valid container of material that exists in my facility, and maybe I just happen to find it in a location other than expected. We all know that can happen. And in this case, we are able to just really scan what's in the location. Plex will accept that. And then as we complete this count, it's going to go ahead and move that. I also changed the quantity there. Plex is going to go ahead and move that to the location it was found in. Right, so we very quickly, probably a little quicker than is physically possible to complete a count. We completed some counts. Those were some ad hoc counts that we just added as we needed. I shouldn't say ad hoc because that's a different time, but we just added those accounts, and they were single counts that we added and completed. In addition to adding our single counts or scheduling counts, we can also use this mass add feature. This may need to be enabled in your PCN to be visible on the action bar here. But if I click on mass add, I have some options. And what this does is it lets you create a group of cycle counts or more than one cycle count at a time. Again, you can decide which cycle type you want. I'm going to stick with inventory. I'm going to plan this particular count for Friday. And the mass add mode is either split, which will create separate counts for each of your parameters that would be selected, or combine, which is going to combine everything into one single count. So I'm going to go ahead and combine, and I'm going to tell Plex I want to combine, and maybe I want to count a few specific locations. So I'm going to use location as my parameter. And the beauty of this is that we get kind of a multi-picker here, where when we're in the parameter configuration in the cycle count, where we're adding a single parameter, you notice we don't have this option. But here in the mass add, I could say, hey, you know what? I want to show me all my locations that are my AZ locations. And then within that result, I could even filter that to search down more. I could hand select which locations I wanted to count. And then with that, I don't have to say add yet. I can go back and search again, and maybe add a separate criteria, right? Maybe I want to see everything that has a warehouse in the name, and I want to add this warehouse storage. So even though these aren't in a defined cycle group, I can actually still create a cycle by selecting these criteria or these parameter values. I can add additional parameters if I want to add a container status. I would need to do a separate count. Let me go back in here and create that for you. I'm just going to select a few of these. WH again. Okay, we remember we're combining, so we would expect when we clicked on add, we would expect Plex to, I'm going to click search to refresh, to show us that single count, right, is planned for all of these locations. If instead we wanted to mass add and have separate counts, we could do split. We could select our locations. We could do this with items. We could do this with any of the parameters that we wanted. All right, I'm just selecting some. And when we click on OK there, we'll see that Plex in the success banner lets us know those counts were created. We'll do a search here and we'll see that Plex will create those individual counts. So mass add, it can also be a very powerful way of kind of getting some of your counts planned in the system ahead of time. Now, again, we want to make sure that we don't have planned counts hanging out too long. We don't want someone doing the wrong count. If maybe we don't need that count anymore, we want to also make sure that we don't start the counts until we're going to complete them, right? So at this point, we've planned them, but if we were to drill into any one of those counts, we see, we still need to start the count for Plex to run that snapshot. So let's hop back now to the presentation. I talked a little bit about the fact that we could do counts on mobile. Now, I don't have a mobile emulator here that I can show you, so I went ahead and just grabbed a few screenshots there so that we can talk through the screens. Cycle count is available in mobile. Planned counts that have been created with parameters and parameter values in Plex UX can be performed on devices running Plex Mobile. Located under the inventory menu, cycle count will be listed. And you can then click on that to find your planned counts, that second picture that's in the middle there. You can select a count and then start it right from the mobile device. You'll start by scanning the location you're counting and any container found in that location, entering the quantity for each serial number. You can change location if your planned count spans multiple locations, but for a long time in Plex Mobile, all the cycle count has relied on starting with location. And in that case, right, the person doing the count may not necessarily know that count number. So it does require some communication between you and your counters as far as which count they should be selecting, and then what areas that should encompass. Once they select their, sorry, let me go back here. Once they've selected their count, they'll start by scanning that location that they're counting, and then any container found in the location, entering the quantity for each serial number as they scan it. And again, you can change that location if your count spans multiple locations. After accounting for all containers found in the location, you can complete the count from the mobile device. Note, you can also restrict users from being able to complete a count both on the mobile device as well as on the computer using security actions and permissions. Often that's used if you don't want your counters to be able to complete the account until you've reviewed it. And just like completing a count from Plex in the browser, completing a count in mobile will update those container quantities, locations if found in a different location, and will retire or move containers not found to a cycle retire location if you're using one. Now, I don't have screenshots of this today, but new in a recent update of Plex Mobile is the addition of ad hoc cycle counts. I believe this used to be available in the old Plex Classic kind of web mobile version, and people have been asking for it in Plex Mobile for and UX for quite a while, right? And this is the idea where you're able to go scan the inventory regardless of knowing what location you're supposed to be scanning. It still starts with a location, but you're able to perform the cycle count on an ad hoc basis without counting against a specific cycle number. So any inventory that's scanned using this ad hoc cycle count is accounted for in all open cycle counts. So great addition. You can see that that's new as of December. I've seen a couple of knowledge base notes about little fixes or hot fixes that have been deployed in some of the most recent versions. And the current version of Plex Mobile is v2.10. So if you're at least on anything past 2.8.1, you should have this functionality available to you. Now that we've seen how to set it up, a little bit how to use it, let's talk about some best practices we have from Plex in cycle counting or having a cycle count program. Before you count, you should do some cleanup. You could run the zero quantity containers report to retire any zero quantity containers found. You may need enable this to enable this report in your PCN. And the value of that is that if you do have some zero quantity containers, you can clear those out so that they won't appear on your count, right? And interfere or affect your accuracy status, as well as creating something for your team to be out looking for that doesn't really exist. You'll want to check the plant for any containers that have missing or illegible labels. You'll want to flag those or move them to an isolated area. Document, write down anything you can about those items so that then when you're looking at your unaccounted for inventory at the end of a cycle, you can compare the two and see if you can identify what any of that material is. Alternately, label anything that shouldn't be counted. You can use paper or stickers to identify any samples or non-inventory material that shouldn't be part of your count. We recommend that you deal with any expired or expiring inventory ahead of cycling. You can use the inventory by shelf life report to view expired or expiring inventory. Use that on a regular basis and determine whether to retest and then have authorized personnel change the expiration if it's applicable, or select other disposition methods as needed. You'll also want to unload any inventory that is at a work center. Your work center locations will not necessarily be included in your counts, but you can use the work center loaded source inventory report to see inventory loaded to the work centers, and then you can unload it and move it to an area where it can physically be counted. Oops, I'm going backwards. Plex also recommends these practices in your counting. And one of them is that 10,000 container limit that I mentioned, right? Plex actually hard code enforces this limit now. So Plex will allow you to actually add a cycle count for any number of containers, but it'll prevent you from actually starting the count if it would include over 10,000. So once you hit start on that count, if more than 10,000 containers are included, Plex will give you a banner message there to warn you and prevent you from starting the count. If you run into that, you'll just need to use the parameters to further limit the count size. You can set up multiple cycle counts in groups that make sense to count together. Make sure your counts don't overlap by including the same locations. Creating counts for single physical areas like a dock or a freezer. You can also count racks or locations that are close proximity to each other, right? So use those types of groupings that make sense for the physical side of counting. You can use your location groups or location types to organize counts. And you can use that optional field of cycle inventory group that I showed you. Remember, that's defined on the location detail screen as another option for grouping locations in a cycle count area. Plex recommends that you stop inventory movement and transactions in or out of the locations being counted. I know we don't all like to actually do this, but when you start a count, Plex takes a snapshot of inventory given those parameters you specify. And since a count isn't posted until you complete it, the timing of those transactions and the postings can be in conflict, right? And that timestamp, preventing containers from being updated accurately when that count is marked complete. You want to decide how to handle containers that are not accounted for, whether to retire in place or whether to move them to a cycle retire location. And you can use that cycle inventory adjustment reason to identify adjustments resulting from any of your reconciliation activities. You want to keep the planned and active cycle counts clean. Finish or delete any started counts that you don't plan on finishing. Generally, a count should be completed in the day it started. And then the risk of having any counts active or started too long is, again, that the status of a container in the count may no longer reflect the physical status of the container in your facility. And then later, if you post the count, you may not be telling Plex the truth about that container. So just remove any planned counts if you don't intend to complete them. And remove any planned counts that won't be completed before a physical inventory. Monitor your counts and end times. Make sure you get an inventory evaluation before and after cycle counts. That should just be really helpful in your process. Additionally, you can use techniques like stickering or marking your inventory that's been counted to help identify any containers that have not been included, or then to tell if they've been missed in a count. For increased accuracy, use mobile devices such as tablets or handheld scanners. You want to do your counting as close to the inventory as possible. And ensure the inventory team works really closely with accounting for final determination of any disposition of your inventory that's not found or accounted for. Accounting should definitely approve or make any adjustments needed. Some standard best practices for cycle counting, regardless of the ERP or inventory management method used, are using control groups. A control group is a small group of items that you count multiple times within a short period of time. And doing this can help you to identify any errors or issues with your counting process. It'll give you an opportunity to iron out any kinks before rolling out your cycle count program system-wide. If you're new to cycle counting, it's a good idea to start with a control group as a pilot for your program. There are many methods for categorizing items and determining frequency for counts. And a commonly used method is the ABC analysis, where you divide your inventory into 3 groups. A parts are going to be your items that are your most valuable or critical, accounting for the largest portion of inventory value and sales revenue. And you want to count those the most frequently. The B parts or items are going to be your moderate value. There'll be a smaller share of inventory and revenue value, and you'll just count those less frequently than your A's, but frequently enough to avoid stockouts. Lastly, we have our C parts or items, and we count these the least often. These are the least important or valuable items. They'll make up a minimal share of your inventory value. Using this ABC classification helps you to effectively allocate resources and efforts to counting the most important items. You can use the inventory turns report in Plex to help get an idea of your movement on some of your items to make that determination. And then just assume that the number of counts will decrease over time as your inventory records get more accurate. You'll still maintain the proportion of counts between the A, B, and C items. Another frequency method is the random sample. And you can use this to count a specific item or items at crucial points in inventory management process, such as after every 10 or 20 transactions of a specific item being produced or sold. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I hope you enjoyed this introduction to cycle counts in Plex. You should now have a better understanding of what cycle counts are, why you should do them, and how using Plex for your cycle counts can help increase inventory accuracy reduce downtime required for counts, and speed up the year-end inventory process. Patty, I'll hand it over to you.
Great, thanks, Amber. Great job. A lot of really good information. We've got a couple of questions coming through on the chat. Number one, Jackie Welder asked, you haven't been able to locate that specific ABC logic. Think of the ABC logic as being, instead of A parts, B parts, and C parts, you just tell Plex the frequency with which you want to which you want to cycle count them. Like Amber mentioned, those frequencies are hard coded in Plex. So we want to make sure that those are spelled exactly correctly. And Heidi, you mentioned a comment here for a monthly cycle count. Will it add the item to cycle count again 1 month from the previous date that it was counted, or just again at the beginning of the month? So there's a chance where you're counting a monthly item twice within a 4-week time frame. I don't know the answer to that, Heidi. I will look at, it's a pretty specific question. I think it's going to be directly related to the frequency with which you have your cycles identified, and whether or not you've got that, that randomizer setting on. That might have to be a Plex case, but I will send this message to Amber to see if she can't do a little research to find out. Can the presentation be emailed? We'll have this actually out on our YouTube channel. Olivia, I will email you as soon as it's out. How's that sound? And L. Richter asked, can you send the print screens? Again, I can email you too. Actually, if everyone would just email me, Patty, let's see, I'll just put my email in here, Patty at Control+M.Solutions. And we'll let you know as soon as it's up on YouTube, and then you should be able to scrape through it pretty darn quickly. Amber, do you see Heidi's question? If you don't, I'll just take a quick screenshot of it. For some reason,
I do see it.
Okay.
And I'll follow up with you, Heidi.
Great. Well, lots of good information. Again, thank you everybody for joining us. Amber, once again, terrific job. You have just been spectacular whenever you do these things for us. So one of my favorite things is when I get to learn new things during these presentations. Amber, I didn't know about cycle groups or the ability to associate a specific reason code to cycle count adjustments. Cycle counts themselves might not seem all that exciting, but the results that you get, the way that your business can function so much more smoothly with accurate inventory makes it worth the effort. So thanks again, everyone, for joining us. I will be processing and uploading this file to our YouTube channel this afternoon, so please check it out. There are over 80 videos of training content available to you, no cost, no obligation. And if you like what you see, give us a thumbs up. Or subscribe and spread the word. Again, no cost, no obligation, available to everybody. So please share the news. Have a great day, everybody. And Amber, once again, thank you. Terrific job today. Really appreciate everything. Our next session will be May 8th on Demandcaster. Ignacio Zuniga is going to be going over what Demandcaster can do for you. So thanks again, Amber. Thanks again for everyone for joining us, and have yourself a terrific day.